God. All right, people, look, I'm sorry. I took a traffic gamble tonight. I lost so horribly. I made the dumbest decision leaving Silver Lake. There was a hipster spill on Rowena, and there was flannel everywhere, and I've never seen paramedics rolling their eyes like that. Like, these people still listen to the White Stripes. It was horrible. So thank you for being patient, and thank you, Claudia, for the intro. I'm going to bring out our panel really, really quickly, but I just want to say that I was very flattered to get asked to do this. I don't really follow comic books. If you know anything about me, you know, it's all just mixed martial arts and tanning. That's what I do. But I say, you know what, I'll just roll the dice and maybe learn something new. And especially the 75 years of DC Comics, my goodness, all the characters they've brought us, like Flying Man and Mr. Bat Guy. So I just realized I could have sat in that chair and talked into that mic, so I'm gonna ladies and gentlemen, applaud while I walk over to my chair. Please. By the way, if anyone, I know that a lot of you probably had tickets to go see the midnight screening of Yogi Bear, and if I've messed up those plans by being late, I will refund you. All right, so we're gonna, oh my God, this book, a great airplane read. If you are traveling this Christmas, just tuck this in your carry-on and just, you know, try to get a center seat and buy the two ones on either side. And enjoy this one. Oh my God. And if you have any stubborn bed bugs, boom, how you doing? Yes. And you can also hollow this out to hide guns or actor Justin Long. Why not? So, oh God, I need my water. All right, so let's bring out our panel. I'm gonna go. Not only is Paul Levitz the guy who put together this book and wrote it here, but two amazing comics professionals who actually, as we'll see when I talk to them, and I'm going to be amazing tonight. So get your Twitter feeds open. These two, I think, both writing-wise and art-wise, really embody kind of 75 years worth of tradition they can kind of blithely pass off in their work if you know them. The first guy I'm going to bring on is actually a friend of mine, and I've been such a fan of his work. If anyone has been reading his recent run on both, The Flash and Green Lantern, which he basically took the Green Lantern, who is in the basic primary color wheel of the DC universe. Green Lantern is like one of the five colors, and he completely exploded that guy's universe in such a of course kind of way. I don't want to spoil it. If you're reading the books, you know what I'm talking about. If not, go get them. There's a whole arc called Darkest Night and has now gone into Brightest Day, and it's brilliant. And he has way too many other credits for me to roll off here, but he's one of my favorites. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Geoff Johns. Geoff Johns coming out here. Geoff, yes. Look at him. Yeah. Sit right there on the far end. Geoff Johns. There you go. How you feeling?
Great.
Good. All right. Why am I eating up time? All right. Our second guest is a artist. One of the he is not a friend of mine, but I am a fan of his. This guy, I can't even. Where would you even start on this guy's credits?
Wildcats. No, X-Men.
Wildcats, X-Men. An amazing run on Superman, Batman. No, on Batman.
Superman and Batman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it called Superman and Batman?
There was Superman and there was Batman.
The Batman run was amazing.
The Hush Batman.
Oh my God.
Amazing.
Yeah, that was incredible. Let's give us like 20 minutes to talk about this. So also, remember the one where he's fighting Killer Croc and the guy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, again, I too many credits to roll off, but the amazing Jim Lee. Jim Lee, ladies and gentlemen.
Watch the mic.
Yep. There you go. Nice. Okay. And then finally, the guy who, look, he did this. He did this. So that should be his intro. That'll be his credits. This guy's background, boom, it's literally that sound. Could you, Jim, you're an artist, pick up that water. Thank you. Come on, mise en place, you got to know. All right, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Paul Levitz. Paul Levitz, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so I'm going to start with Paul, and then I'm going to use these guys as sidebars when you talk about some of the writing and the characters and the art and stuff like that. Tell me the background of this book. You told me that DC approached you to go, and what was the process like to put something like this together?
When DC's 75th anniversary was coming up, the company said, how are we going to celebrate? And one of the projects was the idea of doing a commemorative book. You do that every 20 or 30 years, somewhere in the process. Most of them, you put together the 20 familiar pictures, first cover of Action 1, things like that.
Yeah.
Write down the basic hagiography, and you're kind of finished with it. DC made a deal with Taschen, who has incredible courage as a publisher and does all these just incredibly weird sizes and shapes. You know, a crate of Muhammad Ali.
Yes.
That only he could carry, probably. So
Taschen is a publisher that clearly hates walnuts. They do not like walnuts in their shells.
And small animals.
And small animals, yes.
You just shouldn't have a house pet around books like this. So they did the deal with Taschen, a wonderful art director named Josh Baker, who's hiding here, an editor named Nina Wiener got the assignment. And the team asked me if I would write it, but I had a day job at the time. And I said, I can't. And then when I stopped doing the day job, they still hadn't found a writer, so they said, if you can play catch up and get this done, really quickly, Paul, you can still get in on the fun.
So you cranked this out then. Was this like this wasn't a weird can you have it to us over the weekend? What are you doing? Seriously. Just TiVo your stuff and watch it later.
It wasn't quite that bad,
No,
but it definitely was under the gun. It was, can you compress 75 years of history, 40,000 comic books, millions of comic book pages into a story in a few months of solid writing and then a few months of polish after that?
And then, so you talked about earlier the iconic DC, images, the cover images. So you wanted to go deeper than that, obviously, and kind of delve into the stuff that normally doesn't get brought to light and show how those iconic images were arrived at from earlier DC comics. Was that sort of your aim with this, or?
The goal was to make this a museum in a book. And part of that is you want to have some stuff that no one's ever seen. When I went to see the Tim Burton exhibit that was at MoMA in New York, which was awesome, and I've known Tim for whatever it is, over 20 years, I guess, there were facets of his career that I had never seen before, sketches and things like that. We wanted, really on both sides, Taschen and DC, to capture that same feeling and show, here's an original sketch from something from before you were born. Here's how the artist developed it. When you look at an original page of Dark Knight, in the original black and white, and you see Frank's work, the pencil's still there in the background, Klaus's inks over it, probably everyone in this room has pored over that book at some point, fallen in love with it, but there's only 2 or 3 people in this room who ever had a chance to see those original black and whites before the color went on, see how it evolves. And it's a transformational process to see that. And we wanted to, in that way, kind of invite you into the process, invite you into seeing how the magic was made.
Wow, and the 2 people who have actually seen that have been sealed in Mylar for protection. So just to let you know, they're not going to age. They'll still be around. That leads me to a question to Jim. Have you ever, because you do really detailed pages, the amount of from the, have you ever, there have to have been pages in your past there that either the ink or the colors obscure details that you thought were, but that was crucial, and why did you ink, or has that ever happened to you, or in your career now that he's mentioned that, or?
Where I've drawn something and it was obliterated by an author writing a lot of word balloons. Did you read any of my Marvel stuff? No.
Drink your water, Geoff. Just drink your water, all right?
No, they always place them right where you want them. So It's a little different now because it's all done on layers. I mean, before you would actually draw and they would actually erase the art and letter it.
I'm sorry, I didn't
to
know
put
that.
the words. I don't know why you need them because if you do your job well, you can tell a story with just pictures
Geoff,
silently.
wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Fighting words, Jim.
Yeah, I know exactly.
You're outnumbered here, Jim.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Geoff, you'll have a chance to hop on the bitter bus later. Just let it happen.
But today, I mean, everything's drawn and they electronically or digitally put the lettering on top
Right.
of the pages. So the art is still pristine and perfect and just the way God intended. So not me, but yes.
No, yeah, nice
Yes.
save. All right, now, also, this many. I mean, all of the constant mythology and backstory and retconning that goes on in a universe this huge, and with this many little side paths. That's not a word, for God's sakes. But Geoff, you seem to, especially in a lot of your books and you are very adept at calling up some very kind of obscure details or precedents that have been set in books before that you're working on now. To kind of there's that sort of feeling of I know the whole history here and I can pull from that. I mean, is it? I hate to ask, is that something that you study or is it just something that stayed with you? Is it a world that stays with you easier than maybe other people do?
It's a world that stays with me easier than anything else does.
Oh.
So, when I was growing up reading comics, everything I read I absorbed and draw from that. I research, but I already kind of memorize it all.
Right. So were you the guy that was going, Green Arrow has actually fought Despero before. I don't know why he's saying we've met for the first time excuse me, but in issue, were you that kind of guy?
No, I wasn't.
No,
that
okay.
kind of guy. I wouldn't say it out loud.
But in your head, you'd be sitting there seething, obviously.
Yeah.
What were some of the biggest? I hate to ask a general question like this, but for you in your research, what were some of the biggest surprises that you ran into, either in terms of stuff that people don't know about characters, or maybe some attempts that DC had made at other books that really didn't go and maybe ended too soon? Or does that make sense?
Some of it was just when you stack the history in order, you look and you find things out about people you knew, people you worked with and loved, and you didn't realize. My first mentor in the business really was Joe Orlando, one of the great editors and artists. And it was only
mentioned by David the Watchman, but anyway, go ahead.
It was only in doing the book that I realized that he was the first artist to ever create a new DC book who wasn't already a DC staffer on Swing with Scooter and Inferior 5. Everybody else who started a DC title had already been doing work for the house. He was the first guy to be imported whole hog and do something. It was like, wow, he may never have realized that, but you get a perspective on it when you sort of put the pieces together.
Who was so you actually got to talk to some of these professionals, and what was like kind of one of the more startling stories that you heard, or like a weird, maybe a near miss, or a...
My whole life has been around these guys, and I had 3 different people, all of whom I think are pretty honest and solid, explain to me that they were the person who had extended the art on Action 1 to change it from a newspaper strip into a comic book. And Howie Chaykin used the line that my generation of comic book creator came in at the end of the beginning. So we got to hear the stories about the earliest days from the people who had worked on the books. We're too foolish to write down all the stories or record them, but you sort of imbibe them and then try to translate some sense of that history in a project like this and give you a sense of how it all fit together.
Were there anything, especially in looking at the Golden Age and Silver Age timelines, that the gatefolds, were there details that you put together in your research that you had mapped it out, and these are the facts I have, and I've double checked it, and yet when you submitted it, someone at DC was like, oh, actually, that's not true, or they had a dispute, or...
We have sitting in the audience Mark Wade, who helped with any number of the captions, and in particular, Mark has an extraordinarily good eye for spotting the artists and looking to see, no, that one wasn't inked by Stan Kay, that's a George Klein over Kurt Swan drawing, and he saved us from any number of errors in the process.
Oh no, I agree. Mark's pathetic. So if there is, Mark's another guy like Geoff that seems to, in your books not to, but but you seem to be able to pull up the most obscure details, which all, of course, check out if you go back and look at it. It's like, oh, actually, yeah, Animal Man did do that. So I guess that press. Yeah, stand up. Let the people look at you, Mark. Come on, don't be shy. Look at him. Gaze at him. Nice.
Can I ask a question? Is it?
Oh, yeah.
No. What's interesting is, you're working with, like you said, at the end of the beginning. I mean, back then, from what I understand, I mean, they really just did things kind of willy-nilly. Like they said, hey, gorillas are popular, so let's just put gorillas on the cover and come up with the stories afterwards. And then you get cut forward to Geoff Johns and all these completionists and people that know everything about comics and arguing about, well, this character can't punch this guy with his right hand, he's left-handed, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. When did it move from being something that was just kind of, to give an art example, Vinnie Coletta, when he worked at Marvel, if he had a deadline, he would literally draw, like people on a beach, all these characters that the penciler put in, I heard that he would just draw a huge beach ball in the foreground and just obliterate half the panel and just finish it. And that was the thinking back then. It's just like, it has to get done. This is something that entertains kids and you push
Vinny
it
did
out.
that at DC too.
Right. Okay, right.
Wonderfully
If you see
talented
beach balls,
man.
right. So, and I love his work. And so to me, it just seemed like it went from this period where people really just, put Batman on the moon, that's cool, to the point where now it's like, oh, Batman would never, leave Gotham City. So.
I think it's really the 70s generation in comics, because you have the first generation really of writers and editors coming into the field who had grown up as comic book fans, and they felt it was important to pull the stuff together. And there were guys like Mark Grunwald over at Marvel, who unfortunately passed away too young, who really codified lots of the things and put the logic together. Because absolutely, what you're talking about, the first generation guys, they're just telling stories, and they didn't remember from month to month what they did. Kanigher did the origin of Wonder Woman twice in 4 issues, and neither one had any resemblance to each other. Wonderful writer, did brilliant things, but the assumption was that comics were for kids, and it was a casual purchase, and nobody would buy 2 issues in a row, so you didn't have to worry about that. And then suddenly a bunch of us showed up, and we cared about these things desperately. It all had to fit together, and no, in issue 79. And for a number of years, there was a tremendous pressure to dot the I's and cross the T's. And then we kind of reached maybe a healthier balance where it became, well, there's ways of telling different aspects of the story. And you can do a Dark Knight Returns without it necessarily having to be the absolute destiny of Batman. It's what could happen to Batman. And that became more liberating in the 1980s, and you had a broader range of story. And there's always a creative tension. You want, and I think all of the writers and artists share this, you want to preserve the magic that is the essential of the character, but you want to do something that's new and fresh and what you're adding to it. And that's impossible to express scientifically, but you know it when it's working. And on the really good days, and we've all had the blessing of having those days from time to time in our career, you do something that's a reach and it's wild, and it just works, and you know it's working while you do it. And those were always the great moments in the office when the project was going down. We have a couple of the editors of Watchmen sitting in the room, and both of them, Barbara Kiesel and Len Wein, both of them would run down the hall with pages of Watchmen every time a package would come in from Dave Gibbons, because you just knew something was going on here. And those are the great moments along the way when you're breaking the rules and you're making new rules in the process.
I'd also say something about the history, like drawing from the history. It's not about connecting the dots so much as it is, for me personally, is looking at what would a character evolve if they had went through these experiences. Like, so looking at Hal Jordan, if he actually went through all these experiences, where would his journey go next? How would you evolve that character arc?
Intergalactic mass murderer.
Yeah. How do you get out of that?
That's where everybody's heading. Come on, don't be too harsh on him. Let me ask the 2 youngsters. a quick question because you've just got a few weeks left. But these two,
Thanks.
I've seen the X-rays people. As he knows, he's cool. What were the two things in looking at this book and knowing about the stuff you were just describing of how it used to get done and that the beach ball trick? Yes, it's sort of a cheat, but it's also kind of brilliant. That hey, I hopefully that I would think of something like what was one thing about being a writer or being an artist back then that you're actually sad that you missed? And I know that it was as hard as it was back then, as crappy as it was for writers, as crappy as it was for artists, as horrible as they treated people. What was something that you still like, oh, I wish I could have been there to experience this aspect of it?
Sales.
Like, Jim, would you ever have liked to actually been in an office at the big slanted table with everyone else around you and you're all...
We were
With
just
my, with
talking
my necktie.
Yeah, we were
and-
just talking about like
yeah.
my pipe. I mean,
Yeah.
the pictures, I love them. They're all like dressed to work at Wall Street.
Yeah,
going
yeah.
in, drawing funny books. So.
It was like Mad Men, but they were drawing Flash.
Yeah, exactly. Was there a lot of drinking in the office back then too? Was that I assume cigarette smoking was pretty common.
The writers were a pretty heavy bunch of drinkers. The artists, there were a few of them who we kind of lost to that along the way, but the artists would go bad faster drinking. The writers could sort of hang out at the bar and then sober up enough
Wait, are
to.
you saying that writers can drink better than artists? Is that what you're telling me?
In the 1950s. I'm not talking about the current generation.
Right.
Look, if an artist, if you draw a third arm on Superman, that's like, but if you spell Kal-El wrong, it's like, all right, just correct that.
It's a little more obvious.
Yeah, you can get away with it. So
True origin of Bizarro.
yeah. Now this is going to be a really lengthy, convoluted question, but Paul, you were mentioning how back then it was there wasn't a lot of continuity. It was gorillas are popular, boom, put them on the cover, boom. Now, as much as much as some of that's gone away, in some ways it has not. And I point to like now with DC and Marvel with their own studios trying to get their properties made. If you remember when Batman Begins came out, it was very, very dark and very, very grim, and it made so much money. And it felt like, to me, the studio went, all right, Batman was dark and grim, so Superman, dark and grim, because that works. So it just feels like that pattern still persists, but on a much bigger macro level with some of their properties, because now they're dealing with much bigger stakes if they're turning these properties into movies, into TV shows.
You always have that in the popular culture. I mean, we're in a moment of zombies. And is there a direct line of connection between the revival of dead people in Blackest Night and Walking Dead and Marvel zombies? It's not that someone necessarily sits there and comes up with a battle plan and says, market research says zombies outsell gorillas this week. But ideas get in the public consciousness. And however those memes move around, they inspire us, they fascinate us, and we start exploring stuff like that. And writers develop them, artists develop them, play with them. Some of them work, and the ones that work tend to be catching.
I disagree. So anyway, that was such a great answer. I don't know what to say. How do you think a lot of the kind of the golden age guys would feel if they now saw, that the Dark Knight is a $500 million grossing Academy Award winning film that were there plans back? I've seen fake posters for like an Orson Welles version of the Batman with James Cagney as the Riddler and like just stuff like that. Were they trying to develop the stuff back then, or did they just think maybe this will be like fun little movies here? There's no one ever imagined it would become this deep mythology like it is, or
I don't think most of the people, other than the original creators themselves, believed that it would last that long. The business people certainly didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the writers and artists, Siegel and Schuster, were sure that Superman was going to be an important part of the culture for generations. Bob Kane passionately believed Batman would be in the movies someday. He delighted in going to the movie premieres. He just saw this as the fulfillment of his fantasies as a kid. The creators were way ahead of the business in all of that.
Well, and then my next question then is to no, go ahead.
They used to destroy the artwork too, right? I mean,
Oh,
they
sure.
used to throw it out and just.
And we didn't keep negatives. I mean, nobody thought it was worth keeping negatives for the first 15 years that we were publishing, because who'd ever want to print this stuff again? It's just, this is today's trash.
I remember I was at a New Year's Eve party at a very famous at a very famous person's house, so I knew through friends, who collects comic book art, not old comic books. He collects the actual pages, and he had X-Men #1, the actual pages of not the comic. He bought and tracked on all the pages, and on page 1, there's some bit of dialogue where Professor X is saying something like, "If we don't do this, then this process will become irreversible," or something. And then in the margins, outside of where it would get printed, is the word irreversible written like 4 or 5 different ways, like Kirby sitting there going, "Am I spelling this right?" But just the idea that this guy is sitting there, probably eating a deli sandwich and drinking a coffee, and inventing the X-Men, and he's also going, "I better not look stupid. I don't know, how do I spell irreversible?" And that's a bit of history on the page, but it seems to be that now a lot of the movie studios are waking up to the fact that a lot of the writers and artists are who you should go to consult when you make these movies. I don't know if you've noticed this, Jim, but a lot of especially your details in the Batman comics that you drew, especially just the throwaway details of his costume, and they weren't even fantastical. It was this, well, why wouldn't he have that? That makes so much sense. The little gadgets he has have kind of worked their way into the Batman movies, and a lot of your. I mean, did they come to you to consult on the Green Lantern movie? Did they talk to you about that?
Yeah, I'm co-producing the movie right now.
Yeah, whatever. But they came to you and said, what should, like, how far, and I know that, like, they talked to Brian Michael Bendis about stuff, and have they consulted you about any of the movies that they've done, like, just based on your artwork or your clear sense of these characters, like, well, maybe we should talk to this guy, or...
I mean, I had a very early meeting with Donald DeLine, one of the producers of Green Lantern, and he showed me a lot of the concept art.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for a lot of these things, I mean, they're really adapting the comic book work and for film. I mean, obviously, they're taking 75 years of story and condensing it into an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I think they also, I mean, the technology is now at a point where they actually can do cooler stuff, I think, in many ways than what you can what you used to be able to just draw on paper. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's really at a crossroads where you want to be faithful to the source material, but at the same time take advantage of the technologies that are available. So you look at something like Green Lantern, and then as a departure from what he looks like in the comics, but back then, this was the cutting edge, right? Wearing a skin-tight costume and, flying around with a ring. And so, yeah, I mean, you give your feedback, but I think you have to be mindful of the fact that you want to be true to the source material, but at the same time, it was created many, many decades ago, and you want to kind of keep it looking cutting edge and contemporary. And I think that is one of the strengths of comic books in general, but DC Comics is that it hasn't been scared to alter these characters over time. Otherwise, you would just end up with some of these pulp characters like the Phantom that have really, or even Dick Tracy to a lesser extent, that have kind of ossified it and not become as relevant because they were kind of fixed in time.
The one other thing too about like bringing these things to film is you get all these different things like the sound. What's the ring sound like? It creates a construct.
Oh,
like
wow.
You have to invent all that. So that's what I find fascinating is all these different facets I've never thought about when they come to life.
And all the constructs were just like fists because it's easy to draw a fist. But if you can use a computer to create something cool, you make it.
Though he
a
does
fist
make
with 6 fingers.
He does make a fist. He does make a fist.
Right.
Are they a little more respectful of because I've heard some horror stories from friends of what people have wanted to do when adapting a comic book. I've heard the Matrix Superman stories about like put him in
Catwoman?
Yeah, the Catwoman or even something like Jonah Hex, which I think that they started with the best intentions, but I've never seen a movie where you can literally see the writer's table on the screen where you see the 8 different punch-up guys like, I like that the Constantine movie, can there be demons in this? And then someone else like, what about Wild Wild West with the steampunk? Can we put that in there? And nobody said no to anything. So it's all in this movie. So are they a little more wise, or is there still those mistakes being made?
I think they're starting to understand that the reason that like Marvel's had a lot of success too in Dark Knight that the reason these characters have survived for decades is because they have something, and you have to remember what that something is.
Yeah.
It's not because it's just in the comic books, it's because it's resonating with people and readers and fans, and so they understand that.
It is also, I mean, did you talk a little bit about the rivalry between DC and Marvel and how they both kind of inspired and kind of tripped each other up a little bit in the back and forth, where one would do something that was really sexual, and then the next summer the other one would try to do their version of it, and and now it's happening on the scale of movies with, at least I think Marvel Studios is building their mythology for the upcoming Avengers movie. Is DC Comics doing that? Are they going to try to put together a JLA thing, or?
Well, they have a different strategy, but I mean, Marvel's success obviously helps trigger DC to make more movies, and the comic books I still see things recycle back and forth.
We tell a bunch of the stories from history. The two companies had their first comic edited by the same guy, a man named Lloyd Jacquet, who was one of the early comic book packagers. And it's kind of, serious comic fan historians know it, but it's lost to the popular culture. But it's really sort of one of those two children of Abraham. You got the Arabs, you got the Jews. They're out to kill each other.
Oh boy, here we go.
Years.
Okay, folks, I'm sorry. I knew he would bring this up. We'll give you a refund. Sorry about that. wait a minute, I'm sorry. One guy edited their first,
The
the
first books
same
from
guy.
each company. Mm-hmm.
Wow, so his...
And he also edited a long-running comic called Treasure Chest for the Catholic Church. So really, he's responsible for almost everything that's right or wrong with everything.
I can't believe that why don't nerds make pilgrimages to his grave, like people visiting Jim Morrison and Père Lachaise? And
Some of us do.
Leaving asthma inhalers on the stone. Just they all just get together and let's just spray out a little medicine for our homie right now. Did we want to take some questions from the audience, or were there other Yeah, I think I just heard the. I'm still waiting for the points of contention, sir. Well, let's go into the crowd and let's get some questions from people who are probably even more knowledgeable than someone like me. So, any hands go up? I would. Oh, right there.
We have microphones. If you can just
look
wait
at that.
for the microphone.
It's like the old Mike Douglas show. I love it.
Hi, this question's for Geoff. You briefly said that DC's coming up with a different way of setting up their movie franchises, not the JLA, so to speak. What do you have in? What exactly is in store?
We're in post-production on Green Lantern. Dark Knight Rises is coming out in 12. Zack Snyder's on Superman. That's about all we can really officially talk about. Sorry.
Yeah. And Paul Giamatti's going to be the Flash. All right, next, they're taking some bold moves. It's going to be pretty cool. Right there.
He'd be good for Turtle Man.
Yeah. Work Turtle Man in there somehow. Yeah, let's work mics on both sides. Oh, okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Cool.
Hi. Hi, Geoff. How you doing? This is a question for you. I've been to your comic book store. Really liked it. I go there a couple of times just to see if you actually ever turn up. And
Plant. Audience plant. Where would that comic store be?
well, yeah, it's no, isn't it technically Northridge? Yeah, Northridge. You go up to Reseda and Devonshire. Oh,
Thanks, Ben.
yeah.
And I hear there's like a lot of available parking and a
Yeah,
really
there
friendly
is. There's a
staff.
99-cent store
right by an
and
IHOP.
everything, and
Yeah, I mean,
so,
I'm just here. It's the place to go for your new
CSUN
comics
is
every Wednesday.
nearby if you're a student, so you know
Yeah.
the rival school to
Yeah,
UCLA.
you know.
So go ahead. Anyway, my name is Lex, by the way. Nice to meet you. And yeah.
Lex, perfect.
Yeah, I know, right? I wanted to ask a question about because I don't know how true Wikipedia is, but
Very true.
Yeah, I don't think there's
Please
ever been a
stop,
false
please
thing on
stop,
Wikipedia
please.
ever.
please. The Dakota Universe. How is that going along? And I know you're going to be releasing. Well, I don't know. It wasn't you, but I know there's another writer who worked on Static becoming part of the Teen Titans, which will be released in 2011. So is he going to become more mainstream in the Dakota Universe? Because right now I have the encyclopedia of the DC comic book characters over like the history of time, and he's not even in it. So I'm not saying like I'm a huge fan, but I am.
I love how Lex has 10 of these books in his head right now.
Something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jim's actually the co-publisher. They're publishing a static book next year, but I don't really have much to do with publishing.
Oh, really?
As far as that goes.
Could you really give me any details?
That's that.
I think there's some use of those characters, but I mean,
Static's getting his own monthly book next year.
Yeah, I heard that. All right.
Yeah.
That was about it. That's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I wish Lex had steepled his fingers when he asked this question. That would have been so perfect.
Next time I shall.
Way in the back. I'm sorry to give you a workout there, but way in the back. Yeah. I'm going to zing around the room.
I'm kind of reminded of when Harlan Ellison talked about trying to write the first Star Trek script, and they kept coming up with ideas, and the studio kept saying bigger, and they came with another script and bigger, and they finally destroyed the whole universe, and the studio naturally said bigger. We've seen comics go from the superheroes fighting average little gangsters on the street to these cosmic stories that are getting bigger and bigger, universes destroyed, universes recreating. Is there any feel at the publishing houses for bringing it back down to the street human level?
I think even the most cosmic stories, are the ones that you remember and are fond of most, have that kind of kernel of human emotion at the center of it. I mean, I think, as these event stories with all these big changes and cosmic events, it only matters if you care about the characters. And I think, to Geoff's credit and Paul's credit, I mean, they do that. When Paul did the Darkness Saga, you cared about the characters rather, and the big events. I mean, that's just plot stuff, and that's just narrative, and that gives you the environment to kind of tell your story in. But really, if you don't have that kernel of human emotion at the center of it, I just think it ends up being kind of an event, and not something that people really care for. And I think that, I mean, this is editing 101, but I mean, at the center of every story, you gotta care about the characters. So,
I think that's true, and also I think another point from the history of it, when comics started, people's view of the universe was pretty narrow. Most people didn't have much science background. It wasn't taught a lot in schools. Science fiction was a kind of cult thing. You're in a world now where Scientific American runs cover stories on parallel worlds and picks up art from the old JLA, JSA team-ups and does it as a painting. The public knowledge of cosmic phenomena is much bigger than it used to be. So you can play on a bigger scale after all the Star Wars movies and the Star Trek movies and everything that's helped establish that, as well as what's been done in the comics. So you can blow more planets up, which can be a lot of fun.
I never thought of it that way. Yeah, that is a human level thing, is something on a cosmic scale. It's something that humans deal with at street level. Walk around thinking about that. So, all right. Next question right there. There we go.
Hello. I was actually wondering, Paul, what were the things you were most disappointed would not fit in the book? Like, if you could publish the 10 pages that you really wish had gone in there, what would be on there?
Wow. I don't think there's 10 pages. I think there's probably 1,000. I had
So in that case, when is volume 2 coming out?
I had 3/4 of a word per issue that DC's published to work with. So an awful lot more didn't get in than did. I didn't have much of an opportunity to talk about the ancillary things like the animated universe that's been built up over the years. The guys just did such a phenomenal job with that. I didn't have a lot of time to talk about particularly the most recent generations of creative people. One of the things that I look back at the book as a finished thing and kind of kick myself on, we don't delineate the moment when we started having artists and writers from overseas in not as cheap labor, but as we want the best people from all over the world. That's, I think, one of the most wonderful changes in comics in my working lifetime. When I came in, you had to be within about 50 miles of New York or be Jack Kirby. That was basically the rule. Now, with the internet, I open my email in the morning and I've got fresh pages to dialogue from an artist in Turkey, an artist in Brazil, an artist in Spain. And these guys aren't working like the old Philippine studio did just because we can screw them. But because they're the best people in the entire world. And that makes the material so much richer. And I didn't get a chance to explore that fully.
I'm sorry, but will there be another book? Maybe. Like, I mean, I know that's a weird question now, but I never thought of that. Are they thinking of doing another one of these, or
I don't think there'll be another book that size.
no? But
I'll probably write some more stuff about comics along the way.
the Kindle weighs 80 pounds for this book. It's crazy. The Kindle version is 80 pounds. Over here. Oh, wow. Yeah, the dude with the big beard. Oh, okay. Oh, wow. But the mustache is so thick it is literally casting a shadow on the rest of your face. That's how thick that mustache is. Wow.
I transplanted it from my armpit.
Oh, Lord. Sir, it's Christmas time, please.
Just want to start off with that one. Do any of you own the first Superman?
I have like 3 of them.
All right.
Good Lord, no.
How's the pay in your business? I mean, you
Lots
got the
bet-
cheap
lo-
shoes on. I'm just wondering if you really have a lot of money.
The pay is lots better than it used to be,
Good.
but I turned down buying Action 1 for $130 because I thought that was way too much to pay for a comic book. And these days at $1 million, it's way more than
But none
you ought to pay
of
for a
you
comic.
really own this first Superman.
I do not.
No.
Are you challenging us? Or is it really like,
Well, I collect L. Frank Baum book, Wizard of Oz book.
oh.
So
Those are
one book
beautiful
alone
first
is worth
editions.
$100,000. The first one, Wonderful Wizard of Oz. So
You
I was wondering. So I'm wondering.
No.
No, I got cheap clothes too.
Oh, okay.
All right, but I'm wondering what's your favorite collectible, or do you collect comics?
I have some older comics, but they're from my childhood, so they're from like the 80s. 80s? No, 70s, 70s. So, sorry.
What, Donald Duck?
No, like, no. Giant size X-Men #1, you know, so, yeah, woo. And I bought that for $5,000. So that was a lot to pay for a comic book from your childhood.
What do you think it's worth now?
Probably about $5,000.
Because it's a recession.
Are you interested in buying it?
Right, that's true.
So I have like really just a handful of comics like that. But I actually collect original artwork, like you were talking about X-Men #1 art. I passed on that years ago, but I have Fantastic Four #60, which is the FF,
gorgeous issue.
Inhumans, Silver Surfer, Doctor
Whoa.
Doom, and it has all
The
those
art.
side notes that actually Jack wrote to give to Stan, so that Stan would understand what he drew. Because back then they just kind of, Stan would tell him a story, like the story in a couple sentences. Jack would draw it and put side notes and sort of elaborate what was happening, and then Stan would read the side notes, look at the pictures, and then put thespian talk in there, and it's really awesome, and like it really is like a piece of history, because there's all this other stuff that you don't see in the actual printed comic book. So for me as an artist, I just love collecting and looking at the original art. Wow.
Well, it would seem that even your drawings are collectible. They're original.
Sure. Right, but the funny thing is when I sell my original art, and it goes for a fair amount, happy to say, it actually all my work is actually erased off the pages. So I draw it all in pencil, and then a guy inks over it, and then he erases all my work.
Why don't you just go to a copy machine and save the pencil work?
That's a great idea. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, see, because that's original part of history.
Excellent.
You're
There
talking.
are
all
actually
night
people
about
that do that, but they use the internet and they just download it and they just print it off their printer.
What do you guys normally collect beside comic books?
I have the first series of Lean Cuisines that came out. I have the, including the discontinued Welsh Rarebit one. I have that, the unopened. So I have all those. I have some of the earliest Lean Cuisines from like '83 that are pretty good.
Well, I say
Yeah.
I still have the 15-cent original McDonald's burger in a wrapper.
Patton, I think we have another
That's
question
worth
over
a lot
here
of money.
to your.
This side of the room, right there on the aisle.
First of all, I just wanted to say to Mark, Kingdom Come is one of the greatest books I've ever read. Thank you so much for that. And my question is
Mark, B+. B+. All right, go ahead.
well, my question is
know
mainly for Paul, but Jim and Geoff, I'm sure you can comment on this. I was wondering if you could talk about how the management structure at DC has changed over the decades and influenced decisions like the introduction of new characters and crossovers like Crisis on Infinite Earths and movies and toys and anime, and like the powers that be have said this is going to be a good move for the company and for the industry at large.
Well, I think it's easy to overestimate how much the management structure relates to all of the decisions you're talking about. At the end of the day, creative ideas come from the creative people. And while all of us have had roles in management at different times, these guys now, me before, I think many of the things we're proudest of is the work we do as individual creators coming up with stories, and I think that's always been a big part of it. The goal of management, I think, at least for the 40 years that I've been around comics, and through now four or five different heads of DC, has always been to simply create a stage on which creative people can perform, do a good job, connect them to an audience, and make the thing work. And I think that's going on past my time. Diane Nelson, who's running DC Entertainment, is here this evening. She's taken the company through its latest incarnation, and hopefully she'll have as much fun as I did and last as long as I did with the place. But it's whether it was Diane, me, Jeanette Kahn, Carmine Infantino, Saul Harrison. I can't speak for the original founders in the same way because I wasn't there in their day. But I think all of those people at the end of time wanted to get the best creative people, get them excited, and have them do wonderful stuff.
We're going to do a question from this side, one from the center, and one more from there. So let's go over there. Way in the back, the guy that just did his thumbs up. He's in silhouette to me, and it's very intriguing.
I was wondering, actually, when you work on material that's been around forever, where's that balance between what you bring to it and where, how much you respect the original stuff? And on a side note, because I know this happened for you, Jim, to see someone like take your work and just knock it out of the park, like Sleeper, seeing them turn Tao into the creepiest supervillain I've ever seen, sort of deal. Like, how does that feel from both ends?
I thought Alan did a pretty good job with it.
It's my favorite.
Yeah. I think that really is the beauty of what we do. I mean, it's the single largest work of collaborative fiction in the history of the world, right? So, something like Batman, it can be a little intimidating because you really are kind of stepping up to the plate, and you see the, all the creators that came before you. And you do want to add something to it. I remember when I started Batman Hush, Paul said to me, have fun with the toys, but make sure you add something to the collection. And I think that's how we contribute to all of this. It's not just about going in and riffing off of things that were already there and borrowing the ideas of all these people that came before you, but really taking that and adding something to it so that you are actually an integral part of building the material into a stronger work of fiction. So definitely working on Batman, I was very cognizant of that, I think that's the fun of the business. I mean, I love creating new characters as well, but working within like DC Comics and playing all these characters, and I don't go back and read everything. I really, you're asking what do you draw upon when you're working on these characters? I really just draw upon the stories I remember as a kid, and those generally are the ones I like the best. And it's almost impossible to go back and reread all these comic books and make everything fit together. But I think the trick really is finding the high points and making them your own. And that's what I really also think is awesome about DC is, unlike some other companies where, let's say like Mickey Mouse, I mean, he has to look the same every time you draw the character. With Batman, you're actually encouraged to do kind of your own version, your own take of the character as you're doing these stories. And I think that's just something that keeps the characters and the whole company very fresh and dynamic.
I think it's fundamentally why society still cares about Batman and doesn't care the same way about Mickey Mouse. He froze.
This is over.
Sorry, Patton.
From the center of the room, right there. That guy has something to say. You right there. Yeah, I got you. Here she comes with the speaking stick.
All right. My question's for Jim and Geoff. Me and my friend Justin, we're kind of like amateur comic book artist and writer, and we're wondering what some tips on like how to get into the biz and your experiences with it.
Sure.
So.
Sure. I always tell everybody who wants to be a writer, just write. Like it's free. Everybody can do it. I meet so many people who want to be writers, and I ask them, well, have you written? And they said, no, not yet. And like it's like this is a true story. Like the first time I took the car out, my mom's car out of the driveway, I hit the tree at the end of the driveway, and the next time I didn't because I learned the mistake I made, which was turning too close. But as a writer too, you do the same thing. So the more you write, the more you and you get criticism and feedback, the more you realize what craft is. And there's books I can recommend personally that I think are a great grounding or starting point for writing, but the key is to write and draw. And if you're in school, which you guys look like you are, take writing classes, take art classes, and and draw from life rather than just comic books.
Who's the writer? Who's the artist? Or do you guys do both? I'm the artist and he's the writer. It just seems to me, especially nowadays, with I hate to say that, but with the internet, but there is just no stopping anyone from getting their stuff out there to be seen anymore. Those days are gone. The days of I got to get through the door is just permanently open, and I use a lot of like younger poster artists to promote my shows, and I just find them online, or they'll come up to me after the show. Like you just said, there's guys like, I want to do a poster for you, I want to be an artist. I'm like, well, where's your stuff? And they're like, I haven't done anything yet. I'm like, waiting to get paid for it. And then other guys are like, I have a website, check out my stuff if you want to use me. And they've got, just post your stuff. I mean, especially now, it just seems to me a lot of the new upcoming artists and writers are all being discovered online, unless I'm wrong. But there's a lot of like web-based series that then turn into books because the word just gets out there. If you put it out there and it's good, trust me, the word will just get out there. People will find it. So start writing. There's no one stopping you anymore. And start drawing. Just put it on a website. It'll get found. If it's good, it'll get found. If it sucks, but if it's good, they'll find you. They'll find you and give you work. So, and really, I'm not in the business, so really take my word for it. I know I'm going to expound at length on this. I just, I tell jokes to drunks, but really, take my advice.
Wait. Jim, I didn't get how you got into the business because
yeah,
or like,
what he said. Yeah, I think that's very true. I meet a lot of people, and I think that they're oftentimes hung up on the details of how to break into comics, like what kind of pencil do I need, what kind of paper. I don't know. Use the paper you like. I mean, use the pencil you like. I mean, just don't be held back by that knowledge. I mean, I remember when I first started drawing, I obsessed about how thick the gutters should be between the panels, and I would be measuring them, in the comic books, and then going, all right, this is they produce it 64%, so then I gotta take this 7/8 of an inch. And what is that? Oh, fuck. And then I would spend days on this, and I realized, it doesn't matter. And I just do it. I basically don't even measure the stuff. You know what I'm saying? So you just there's something to be said for just creating and not worrying about that kind of material. I used to be held back by having the need for reference. Like if I had to draw a plane, I had to have a picture of a plane, and now I just kind of draw the plane from my memory and imagination, and hence weird planes. But anyway, so but there's a lot that you can do just using your brain and your own sort of innate passion and enthusiasm, and that's what I think you should do. And actually, and everyone works differently. I would say definitely draw from life, but there are definitely guys that are working in comics that kind of found their success through other means. So whatever gets you sitting at a table for 8 hours a day drawing, that's what's working, right?
Look, maybe the most successful young creative person to come through something touching comics in the last batch of years is Jeff Kinney with Diary of a Wimpy Kid. And he was just throwing stuff up on a website, creating. An editor found him. The last print run of his last book was 6 million copies out the door. I don't know if he's 30 yet. If he is, it's just barely. And exactly what's been said here. Do it. Start writing. Don't worry about whether you're a comic book writer or a comic book artist. Be a writer. Write whatever you can. Be an artist. Draw whatever you can. The world will find you. You'll find the world. Yeah. It's a great place to get
and
to.
Also, if you keep putting stuff up online, down the road in a couple years, if you do get a shot, they'll go back and look at stuff and go, well, this guy's writing all the time. So he's already, we don't need to tell him when to start. He already started, so it will help your standing if you're already doing stuff. But if you're going to wait for someone to tell you to start writing, you'll never start because no one will tell you because you haven't written anything yet. Now go out and do it now. Go run.
You should be
Run.
running.
Go do it. Get a GeoCities page. Start writing. Last question, way in the back up there with the hand up. Yeah, you.
The description of this event talked about digital comics, and so I guess what is it that you guys wanted to say about digital comics and DC in the future and all that?
That's a boss.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting time. I mean, the last chapter is really about that kind of evolution. I mean, I know you talk about the MMO, the DC Universe online game, which is shipping early next year. 5 years in the making. I have to mention it. Come on, 5 years of my life. I can't say. Anyway, so it's early. Gosh, no, to me, this is a great example of something that would be a fantastic digital book. Or you're talking about additional chapters. You should do as digital downloadable content where you buy the book and then you get additional chapters sent to you. I mean, I think that's the kind of melding of the traditional print, because you can't do this. You can't do this book justice in digital format. So to me, it's not about digital replacing print. It's really about print optimizing itself for what it does best, and digital doing that for its own format. But I would love to have a copy of this digitally, just so I could read it while I'm actually traveling, rather than being, suffocated by it in bed trying to turn the pages. So I'm a small guy. It's a heavy book. Proportionally, it's very, it's heavy. Anyway, so I think it's an exciting time in the business, and I think it's the drive towards the digital comics is actually going to it's going to push the print side to be more inventive and exciting. So I think there's going to be a lot of cool things coming out next year because of that.
Paul, final words?
It's been amazing to be part of this history for 4 decades. The fact that these characters are as important to the culture as they are today is a phenomenal thing. And it's really the result of all the creative people who poured their soul into it, dreaming from when they were kids. It's not a coincidence that the vast majority of these characters were created by people who were young and dreaming and sort of didn't know it was impossible. And somewhere out there's someone who's dreaming something up today that, with a little bit of luck, can be an important part of the culture for the next batch of decades. And it'll be fun to watch how that evolves, too.
Yeah, wow. All right, well, guys, another round of applause for Geoff Johns, Jim Lee, and especially Paul Levitz. Get this book. This book is amazing. And thank you all for your patience, for being so cool. I'm so sorry I was late. I got to run. The new Smart Choice frozen dinners are at the store. I got to get in line at the Gelson's. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, and happy holidays.